Of India and Question Time will be bringing you a briefing on the new mace that was introduced in Parliament yesterday. The mace has been specially designed as a symbol of the transformed South Africa. It's been a long time coming and has generated a lot of excitement in Parliament. We start off with the designer Niran Naidu explaining his vision of the mace.
It's an honor to have worked on the design of the mace and to have served the National Assembly. I must thank the presiding officers for that opportunity. I designed the mace by chance while working in Dr. Janwala's office, a no heritage specialist, jewelry designer, or expert on colonial history. My background is in communications with a love for art, design, and the country of my birth. The mace of the National Assembly and the black rod of the NCOP constitutes the symbols of Parliament. This forms part of our national symbols together with the flag, the coat of arms, and the anthem. All have their own significance and meaning. The mace has its own symbolism too. But first, let's go back to the existing mace. It has, among other things, images of ox wagons, the Castle of Good Hope, Van Riebeck's Dromedaris, and the 4 provinces that existed before 1994. These symbolize colonial rule, settlement, and conquest. While the mace may have been relevant for the time, clearly these symbols are inappropriate for our current democracy. We also have to celebrate and acknowledge other aspects of South African and African life. National symbols should occupy a central place in public life. They should reflect the ethos of a nation and thus evoke a sense of national pride and patriotism, as evoked by our national flag and anthem. Parliament called for submissions on what people would like to see in the new mace. Some made suggestions to include indigenous wood, while others submitted drawings. The Bureau for Heraldry considered the submissions and recommended designs. These were radically reviewed in Parliament through consultations with presiding officers of the National Assembly, members, and whips. A model was also constructed for public comment. I designed the mace based on these collective inputs. What we have is a product that is a result of broad and popular participation. So let's look at the design in more detail. The design of the mace takes the form of a knobkerrie, which represents a traditional symbol, African symbol of defense, but also of authority and jurisdiction. Similarly, the National Assembly has the authority to represent and defend the people of South Africa, apart from its many other functions. A knobkerrie is also a well-known symbol, especially in rural areas, and is common in other parts of Africa. The head of the mace has a handcrafted African drum made of gold. The drum represents a calling when sounded. Here it represents a calling to the people of South Africa to gather and to speak. The word parliament comes from an old French word meaning to speak. Speaking invokes the rich history of African oral tradition. Speaking has a particular significance because it was through dialogue and negotiations that South Africa reached a political settlement about 10 years ago. We know from archaeological finds such as the Golden Rhino and other artifacts found in Mapungubwe and elsewhere that Africans mined gold hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. The use of gold is a recognition of African discovery and of the indigenous knowledge of African people. More recently, it is also a source of economic wealth. Chiseled and engraved on the drum are people involved in activities depicting a nation at work in all sectors. Our sports people, our artists, and cultural workers represented by a saxophonist, miners, drivers, the rural, the urban, the business community, and the office workers. This is in recognition and celebration of the labor of our people who produce the social and material wealth that we live off and enjoy, but importantly, whose labor also contributes to creating a better society. It also signifies a people-centered society. On the top of the drum is a book made of gold, which represents the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. It represents a shift in parliamentary sovereignty to constitutional democracy. The Constitution provides the broad framework and the principles around which we gather to speak and the issues we need to talk about. The Constitution is positioned on top of the drum, highlighting its importance as the supreme law and also the center stage the Constitution enjoys in our society. Inscribed on the book in gold is the preamble of the Constitution. Each line is written in an official language beginning alphabetically with Afrikaans. This is in recognition of the diversity of languages, but also of culture, since language is both culture in itself and a means by which culture is produced. In addition, language is important in how we construct our identity. Language is our means of communication through which we negotiate our political, social, cultural, and economic life. Stretched across the top of the drum is Springbok leather, representing the animal life of our country. The Springbok is our national animal. The leather is fixed to the drum with 9 local minerals, each appearing twice. At the base of the drum are sand figures similar to those of the coat of arms taken from the Linton stone, which is an example of rock art dating back about 20,000 years. This pays homage to the first inhabitants of our land, the Khoisan, and is a celebration of our humanity that has evolved over time. It is also a reference to the region being the cradle of humanity. The figures are depicted showing social interaction, cooperation, and solidarity. It is also celebratory in nature. This reflects the spirit of our nation. Below the drum are rings made of platinum. The inspiration for these come from the rings worn around the neck of Ndebele women, in itself a form of identity. It pays tribute to African tradition, rituals, belief systems, and culture. Platinum rings are also found around the beaded flag and at the base of the shaft. Below the drum is the national coat of arms, which is inlaid in enamel into the solid aluminium shaft. Both ends of the shaft have bands of black and white diamonds set in gold and mounted to the shaft. This celebrates our mineral and natural wealth. The shaft of the mace has indigenous dark candlewood and light boxwood inlays, both very hard and resilient woods. The wood, together with the leather, is a recognition of our rich biodiversity. Towards the center of the shaft is the South African flag, beaded in the traditional way by a woman using glass, platinum, and gold beads. Beadwork is common in Africa and used in South Africa during various ceremonial events. It also represents a complex means of communication and social organization. All the materials are local to South Africa. The techniques used to ply these materials are a combination of high-end South African technology and ancient techniques of silversmithing, engraving, and chiseling, but also traditional techniques of beading. Combining the materials and techniques was an engineering feat in itself. The mace is the jewel of our nation. It speaks a visual language that is African in character and in nature. It exists comfortably at the cusp of tradition and modernity, of celebrating our ancient history and evolution to modern society. It recognizes our diversity of plants, animals, and resources. It's an affirmation of the society we would like to forge and of the grain of indigenous and contemporary African knowledge, tradition, and culture which becomes one with our being. The mace is challenging in many ways. It encourages each one of us to consider and reconsider how we relate to the various layers of our society that it reveals. Personally, working on the mace forced me to consider my own identity and reinforced my rights to citizenship and patriotism, which was denied for most of my life. Working on the mace confirms first and foremost that I'm African. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Naidu. I think it is perhaps appropriate to recognize the large part that Mr. Naidu played in the design of the mace as he has presented it to you, and I would ask that you acknowledge that role that he has played in that process.